Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to another episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. And you are not seeing things. Mike and I are together again for another episode. That's right. I'm Joe Marcello.
I'm Mike Farah.
And we have the absolute pleasure of bringing you an absolutely great interview. We are talking to none other than Brian Pulido. You may know Brian from his work on Evil Ernie. He was also the head of Chaos Comics. They also had a great line of WWF at the time, now WWE, of comics that included Steve Austin, Undertaker, Kane, and Mankind. Some really great work, but more importantly, he has some great stuff coming up.
Yeah, you probably know his most famous character creation, Lady Death. And of course, she has transcended Chaos Comics and the end of that imprint and is now on Brian's new company, which is called Coffin Comics. And Lady Death has a new crowdfunding project coming out. It's called Lady Death Savage Reign, coming out tomorrow, February 6th, from a new crowdfunding platform, which is Coffin Launch. So go on over to Coffin Comics, sign up for Coffin Launch, get the new Lady Death book, and in the meantime, check out our interview with Brian Pulido.
Brian Pulido. How are you, sir?
Greetings, guys. I'm doing great tonight. How about you?
Doing very well, thank you. An absolute pleasure to be talking to someone who has just created such iconic characters and been part of just such amazing work. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We're going to start the same way we do with everyone, and
Okay.
that is we're going to ask how you first discovered comics.
Great question. I first discovered comics as a kid living in New Jersey. I grew up in the New Jersey Shore. And on the weekends, Sundays, frequently, my family would go to the local auction houses, specifically Collinswood Auction in Collinswood, New Jersey, or Englishtown Auction. Now, both of these places had these little magical stalls. And in the front of the stalls, they sold magazines and books. But if you knew where to look, behind a couple of rows were comic books. So as a kid, even before I could read, I was fascinated by the bright colors, the action-y covers themselves, and what lie inside. And for whatever reason, ever since I was a kid, the interplay of words and pictures have just completely delighted me. So I was buying comics, the sort of comics sometimes where the top of the comic would have the inks on it. And I think these sellers were selling flawed comics. Sometimes the top third of the covers are stripped for the returns. Sometimes the covers were gone completely. And I am proud to say I have many of those comics to this day. But that began the interest. And then this would be off and on through the years. But for whatever reason, my local pharmacy, about 2 miles north from where I lived, I walked in and saw a spinner rack of comics. Now, I hadn't put together that comics were periodicals that were put out on a consistent basis. I was just used to them as artifacts of the past that were in these little shadowy stalls at flea markets. So to see them on a spinner rack started to tell me something. And the first book that attracted my interest was Captain America 176. So that was in July of 1974, the summer. And fascinatingly enough, this particular issue was when Cap quit. Something happened and he lost his faith and he was not going to be Cap. So, however, that particular book was the comic where I began serially collecting comic books monthly, and understanding that there was a new issue coming with perhaps a monthly or bi-monthly frequency. And I just started early on. I was a Marvel kid, but I was also, even before I knew the man's name, a Jack Kirby person. So around that time, I'm catching the tail end of Kirby at DC, probably the middle of his run at Commandy. And that just blew my mind. And that's where it began. It has never ended. I just celebrated my 50th anniversary of reading comics consistently, including Captain America, this past July, 2024.
I think it's amazing that you have an anniversary of collecting comics.
Yes, I do. Every year. I do.
You know, we talked to a lot of people, and we asked the same question because I thought we always think it's very interesting how people get into comics, and they have many of them, at least, have a very similar story. They start reading, they get into their their pattern of whatever characters they enjoy, then they kind of get away from it for a little while, and then
Mhm.
they find their way back, and
Yeah.
in doing so, trying to collect all the stuff that they had lost and previously, but um very few of them would say that they have an anniversary of collecting. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Well, like everybody, I could commiserate with the times in my life where I amassed these wonderful collections and certain things would happen. I'll give you an example. Um, I'd go on the record as saying, up until the time testosterone crept into my body, I was a comic book collecting genius. It was insane the runs I would have because there weren't the formal comic book shops as we know them today. There were a handful of shops that did sell back issue comics, but there was no direct market system. But as a kid, I mean, I'm 12, 13, 14. I have full runs. Tales of Suspense, 58, all the way through whatever the present day cap was, 176, let's say. But beautiful runs. Fantastic Four, Avengers, the list goes on. But man, soon as testosterone kicked in and I needed some money to impress the ladies, I'm sad to say sometimes I would divest of these phenomenal collections, but I guess it paid off. I had a pretty decent run as a teenager with the ladies. And now, of
Well,
course, like, now in entering being a senior citizen, yes, I am recollecting all that stuff and quite giddy at it. In fact, I just this past week, uh, completed Incredible Hulk run 102 to 181 the way I wanted to have it. So I was missing a couple pieces. I got them in Saturday and it was big win. Got my run complete.
That's pretty
nice.
impressive.
It was fun.
Congratulations and congrats
Yeah.
on the anniversary as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I read online on your site that you have a complete or you've never missed a monthly issue of Captain America since you started collecting.
Never. So imagine this. So this is me, poor high school student, always got my cap. Poor college student, always got my cap. Poor post-college student, always got my cap. So yeah, no matter what's happened, and I have all what I would consider his key appearances, particularly in the 60s and early 70s. My favorites, the first time, let's say, what is it, Strange Tales, what 103 or 4, where Acrobat was posing as Cap, or Strange Tales 159, which is Nick Fury versus Cap, stuff like that. What is it, Daredevil 43 versus Daredevil, stuff like that. I just, adore those first time Captain America met whomever in the Marvel
Right.
universe. I love that stuff. So I have them.
Awesome.
I also have, I mean, don't get me started, guys. Like I'm a collector. Like I am a comics professional uh, to feed my
to feed the
collector habit.
collection. Yeah.
So I have the most obscure Cap stuff. I mean, there's like some Captain America, like Kool-Aid promotional comics. I'm always chasing some silly thing down. Fix Cap in it. I'm interested.
Well,
Now I feel good.
there's
I have my
always
shield right there. That's
yeah.
awesome.
I got a Cap shield in the next room. Definitely, probably made out of vibranium.
And there's always more, right? You think you know every appearance and you think you know every piece of merchandise, but there's always
Yeah.
discoveries to be made.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun. Also too, I'm trying to be disciplined about it, so I generally limit myself to English language. But I just saw this beautiful reprint from Italy of Tales of Suspense 58, and it's called, it has this cute little, almost folklore-like logo that says Fantissimo or something like that. And I'm like, oh, this is like crack for me. This is what heroin addicts must feel like when they're going through withdrawals. Like, I gotta have that.
All right. So you started out as a passionate reader and collector.
Yeah, yeah.
When did the light go off in your head that you want to create these comics or you want to get into the profession of making comics?
It hadn't occurred to me. I actually worked in the film business. I graduated NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, the film department in 85. And I went out and I worked in film production. So I was working on film production of the day, movies like Bright Lights, Big City, Big Business, stuff they were shooting in New York, music videos, etc. And there came a point as I rose through the ranks, beginning as a kid who got coffee, and then ultimately to what's called first assistant director. So that's the person who essentially directs the set for the director. The director directs everything in front of the camera. The assistant director orchestrates everything behind the camera. So after a while, I realized that I was very good at this job, but I really woke up one day and realized, how did I get here? I've never have aspired to do this particular job. Strangely, at least at that point in my life when I was younger, there wasn't a bridge towards director, let's say. So there wasn't quite a bridge. So I started writing screenplays. And the first screenplay I wrote was Evil Ernie. And very quickly upon completing that, a friend of mine got the screenplay of Evil Ernie to the people who produced the movie Hellraiser, a gentleman named Christopher Webster. They read it, they loved it, and they said, this is great. You can direct it, and here's your offer. So the offer was $40,000. Now imagine, I'm a penniless post-college student knocking around, working on films, looking for an opportunity. And they said, we'll pay you $40,000 to direct it, which is great. You're the writer, but all the rights revert to us. And for whatever reason in my primitive mind, I couldn't reconcile that. So I said, okay, screenplays are viewed as this document that props up a desk until such a time that it comes to life. It's not viewed as a property. So even in my primitive state, being 24, 5 years old, I said, tell you what, I think I'm going to make this thing a comic. Maybe if I make it a comic, it could be viewed differently. So maybe I would have some leverage perhaps if it were ever to be made into a film. So that's exactly what I did. I chose then to make it a comic, and that began a 3-year journey. So what I did in the beginning was I adapted the screenplay into a 5-issue series, and I went around and I looked for artists. Now, again, we're going back to 87, 88. So I began the development process with a painter from New York called Eric Bichet, a friend to this day, to develop the look and the feel of the world, the look of the character Evil Ernie, the character Lady Death, etc. Then I began looking to hire artists. So I put ads in Comic Buyer's Guide. Remember Comic Buyer's Guide? And then another one called Comic Career Newsletter. So in the end, and over time, I got about 70, 71 replies. And out of those people, I tried 11. Out of the 11, when I tried them out, ultimately none panned out. And it might have been for artistic reasons or generally professional reasons, meaning, hey, can you do 4 pages? And they wouldn't hit the marks. And actually, no joke, I gave up. About 3 weeks later, after giving up and sort of reconciling myself to okay, I guess I'm just supposed to be a guy who works on a film crew, I got another submission. And that submission was penciled by Stephen Hughes and inked by another person. Now, I don't know exactly what informed this inside me, but I looked at those inks and I said, these inks are not good, but whatever this guy's doing underneath here, these pencils, it's special. So I actually did hire both the guys. There was a falling out with the inker, and Stephen Hughes and I met up. He was in Boston, I was in New Jersey, and I said, hey, you want to give a run at this? He said, yes. Self-funded Evil Ernie, packaged all 5 issues, then brought it all around to all the publishers of the day. That would include, gosh, there was brands like there was Tundra. So Paul Jenkins passed. I like to rib him about that. There was Monster Comics, but ultimately I picked the best of the worst deals that let me retain the rights. And that was a deal with Malibu. So that would be guys like Dave Ulbrich, Tom Mason, and Scott Rosenberg. So that's my story of how I put it all together. Now, that was like a 5-minute story, but it really took about 3 years to accomplish. And that's how I got my start. I made my start.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely sort of answered a bunch of questions we had in a row coming up, which is great. But let me ask you this. How did you sort of parlay that initial Evil Ernie miniseries into what became your own company, basically, Chaos Comics?
So we do the Evil Ernie story with Malibu. And at the end of the 5 issues, they said, this didn't do too bad. We're going to do a special edition of Evil Ernie. So they repackaged it with extra stuff in the end. Great. Came out again, big hit. And these are little, these are little numbers at the time. I think Evil Ernie, Youth Gone Wild #1, first appearance of Lady Death, Evil Ernie, was about 12,400, if you were to believe the publisher. And then, as what would happen normally, #2 goes down, but then 3, 4, 5 went up, up, up. So they approached me about a sequel. I had a sequel in mind. So we start negotiating. We negotiate for the sequel. We finally do it successfully. And let me admit to you, sometimes being on the other end of me for a negotiation is not the easiest thing in the world. I'm completely demanding. I asked for everything. However, we got it done. And really what I was trying to demand largely was that Evil Ernie would go from black and white to color, and that there'd be a living wage paid to Hughes. I actually never took money on Youth Gone Wild because I was playing the longer game. And so the same thing, I wanted, Steven to be able to put real passion into the work, but be able to be paid to do that. So we negotiated that. So let's say that negotiation was a verbal handshake on a Friday. On a Monday, they called and they just said, yeah, no, we're not doing this. Now, what was happening at the exact same time for them, the early Image group was bringing their material to Malibu to launch. I don't know if you recall that, but that was the first year of, well, prior to the Robust Image launch, they were doing it through Malibu as a service provider.
Yeah.
So there we are, destitute. I'd already put some feelers out to other companies, and they didn't seem to get it, and they didn't seem interested. So we bootstrapped it. I rolled up my sleeve. I did not know anything about doing this. And I threw, let's see, if my memory serves, it was, let's say, November of 92, perhaps. And I said, I'm putting a comic book out in June of 93. Boom, that's it. And so I announced and packaged up Evil Ernie the Resurrection #1 for June 93, I believe it was, and headed toward it. And not knowing anything about publishing a comic book, not knowing about printers, not even knowing one colorist in comic books. That was my humble beginning of going after it with Chaos Comics.
I wanted to ask because, look, I think anyone who obviously collects comics sees a lot of characters, on the racks, and your characters really jump out, whether you read them or not.
Yeah.
They capture your eye. I mean, you're drawn to them. Certainly Lady Death is one of them, because I'm not going to be shy about it. She's a hot looking character.
Yeah. No apologies.
When you're creating, Evil Ernie, did you have any inkling that, Lady Death would even become such a big hit?
Hell no. No, I authentically didn't. But what I can tell you is this. So we're putting out Evil Ernie, and he's selling reasonable numbers, and we're having a blast doing it. But I would go to conventions simply to kind of, put some dollars together. And this was back again, early 90s, right? I'm living in Southern California at the time, Jersey guy, moved to Southern California. And I would actually, this is very early on. People weren't doing this. I would simply just go to Kinko's and I'd get copies made of these magnificent pages by Stephen Hughes. And I'd sell them for $1. When we declared that we would be Chaos and we were moving into that, we knew that we're going to make a Lady Death calendar, because people would simply look at the pages and respond to this character. Well, the first image that Hughes did was the February image, which was a beautiful picture of Lady Death on a bed with a symbolic broken heart in front of her. So I would make that a print as well. Since it was in color, I charged $5. So I'd know when I'd go to a con, I would have X number of each Evil Ernie print and X number of Lady Death print. And it was not lost on me that at the end of the day, these Lady Death prints really sold. It was truly that simple. So I knew, I've always loved world building, and I love the idea of serial entertainment, and one character reveals next character. So we knew we were going to do her story. We felt like we had something, but no one could have predicted what happened when Lady Death #1 came out in February 9th, 1994. And our world changed within a week. And my life has never been the same since then.
Yeah, it was I always remember um looking at Lady Death, and the couple of times I went into a comic book shop as a kid with my father at the time. I remember him was like, "What are you looking at? What is that? Where'd where are they selling this stuff?" Um, but yeah, no, I was always a fan of just Evil Ernie, and man, Lady Death just looking just smoking hot.
Thanks.
Um,
May I speak to that for a minute?
absolutely.
So, I mean, I appreciate you noticing. I actually take an inordinate amount of time in character design, and although I'm the writer and creator, I actually design every character that I publish. And it really takes a certain amount of time to get to the type of simplicity that connects with a large group of people. Now, in my case, I've never aspired to do mainstream comics. I love them. I read them. I've always loved cultish material. So I'm equally informed by heavy metal music, horror movies, as I am, in particularly 70s Marvel supernatural comics, as I am with anything else. So with that kind of recipe in my mind, I look to excite and thrill people like myself who like that kind of stuff. So I also realize that the comic book shelves and racks, and even at conventions, are highly competitive. There's a lot of faces on a comic book shop. And the question I always ask myself is, how do you stand out? So you could see, just through luck of the Irish, in a sense, that Lady Death is an infinitely contrasting character. I mean, the closest character to her look is what, Silver Banshee from DC,
Yeah.
but she inevitably explodes off the page because every color behind her is a contrast or helps push her forward, whether it's red, blue, black, just helps push her forward. And the same thing with Evil Ernie, very over the top. Other characters I'm associated with: Purgatory, Chastity, some of the newer ones, La Muerta, Hellwitch, Lady Satanis. It does take some time in the design, but there comes a time where it kind of clicks, and I've gotten it down to what I call the simplicity that will connect with my people.
So, Lady Death and Evil Ernie, and your first primordial creations,
Yeah,
all came out during the 90s, and we know there was this great swell of interest in comics. There were what is perceived as sort of the excesses and extremes of the image creators and things like that.
it was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great stew pot. I mean, that's when we came
Yeah.
up actually, into comics, and so I love it. I have a fondness for this. But a lot of this was all happening around you, and there's Wizard magazine.
Sure. Yeah.
There's Billy Tucci's She is going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah. Billy and I
and
met very early on. Yeah.
yeah, and all of a sudden, there's this label out there, right, for these characters, bad girls, right? So
Yeah.
it's this bad girl wave of comics. What do you think about, first of all, that time, and what do you think about that label? Is it something you embrace? Is it something that was of its time and things have moved on from that, or do you reject it wholesale?
So that was, I mean, the whole Bad Guard label was actually probably a pretty smart marketing ploy from Wizard and others to sell more books. And in a way, I certainly have no problems with it whatsoever. What happened really was Lady Death came out. A month later, She came out. And within a month of that, Vampirella came out. And somewhere in that area, that phrase was coined. And we benefited from it, clearly. So yeah, no apologies. And I have no apologies for the type of comics I do. I don't care. I make boobs and blood comic book. They're over the top and they're for a certain group of people. And the people who like it, they love it. They are dedicated to it. And the people who don't get it, or the snobs, it's okay. It's not for them. So that's kind of my stand on the whole thing. I mean, people can tell me all day, how, good or bad they are. I like when they say good. I actually don't care when they say bad because I'm used to it, right? So the label, I think, has served us. And talking to Billy, who's a dear friend of mine, we get a kick out of it. We're never offended by it. It was kind of funny though, was the Wizard guys, who many of them actually continue to be friends. Like sometimes it was a contentious relationship because for some strange reason, they're the ones that are obsessed with Lady Death having large breasts, and we're just like, well, comics is exaggeration. You know, not every man looks like the Hulk or Superman or Batman, nor do they wear, you know, their underwear on the outside. Comics is the fantastic. So the notion of, if you're going to make a comic about idealism or exaggerations, why not go for it? So again, I never understood that. The same people kind of liked it, maybe behind the scenes, were making fun of it. But I always thought that was an impotent argument, because, you know, it's just good stuff. Who doesn't love idealized figures, male or female? We, even as guys, you know, we're looking at Batman. I don't have a body like Batman. People rarely do. It's idealized figures and dream-like, fantasy-like figures. So never had a problem with it. The bad girl tag and moniker has been phenomenal to our household. So no complaints.
I want to ask about your, basically, you know, Chaos's kind of stable of characters. You had Purgatory, Chastity, Jade. You also had a whole bunch of WWF characters, which,
yeah,
I'm a huge wrestling fan. So I remember when these came out, I jumped out. I was just collecting all of them. Some of them hit, some of them hit better than others. I think The Undertaker was, I mean, it made sense, you know, like it's absolutely this fantastical, you know, character with this lore. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Bo Smith really, like, that was a home run.
And, you know, Kane and Mankind as well. It was just great. Were these characters ultimately what you wanted Chaos to and, you know, to embody?
You know, it's interesting you asked that. So it's a complicated question. When Chaos was off and running, there were periods of time, good sized periods of time, where we outsold Batman and Superman for months on end. And we really took great pride in that. And at times there was a 1 month where Coffin Comics was the number four publisher of comics in America. And as a young publisher, I chased that a little bit. And I actually think that was a folly. It was not the right, it was not the right goal. And that's okay. I've learned since. However, when we did line extensions like WWF at the time, or Megadeth, Static X, Insane Clown Posse, I thought they complemented what we did fantastically, because the audiences crossed over. You'll notice that there's the trend a little bit, like regular guy, blue collar guy quality to the comics. So it's an everyman kind of comic company. You know, the same guy who would like Metallica would like some wrestling, who could like Megadeth. So I saw those as all very complementary.
That was me.
Yeah. So, however, you know, within all that, you know, the idea that I was kind of, you know, trying to chase, always competing with those larger companies was, again, I don't think it was completely authentic, and I learned my lesson.
One follow-up question is, you mentioned that that you like horror. Do you have a favorite horror movie?
Come on now. So my favorite horror movie, you know, I'll tell you the answer to that, but I could go back and I could tell you stories that'll blow your mind about the wrestling era, because all the wrestlers were phenomenal. WWF treated us like kings. We ran it. And as fans, we had the times of our life, all of us, the wrestlers and us. Anyway, my favorite horror movie I saw at the drive-in the weekend it came out. My mother was always a horror fan, and she would show me horror films from everything from like Attack of the Hideous Sun Demon to Vincent Price and Last Man on Earth. So this particular weekend, my mom takes myself, my sister, and my best friend at the time, a guy named Brian Custer, to the drive-in. It's 1968, and the movie we saw was Night of the Living Dead. So I think I was 7-year-old seeing it, and it scared me. And I loved that feeling. And I have since seen that film well over 100 times. I watch it every year for sure. I have the Criterion collection of it. I am a maddeningly deep track Night of the Living Dead fan. Long before it was trendy, I did a pilgrimage to Pittsburgh, where all the creators are. I knocked on the door, met them. I got personal tour of the Image 10 studios where they filmed the basement scenes. I sniffed through the archive of screenwriter John Russo long before it was collectible. I have contracts from the movie, canceled checks, all kinds of artifacts from it. I adore it. I wish there was another movie that would come along that would blow my mind as much as that movie has, but it hasn't. And every time I watch it, in fact, I just watched it last October, I find something new about it every time. So the movie, its joys are endless for me. So Night of the Living Dead, final answer.
Awesome. Awesome. No, I respect that. That's really cool.
You didn't even need to phone a friend on that one. Before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to stop again, because you mentioned it a number of times, how fitting I think Megadeth as a band and thematically was with Chaos.
So good.
I don't did, and you know, my Megadeth fandom goes back a ways, but it's lapsed over the years a little bit.
Yeah.
Did the character that appeared on all of their album covers, I don't know if he had a name necessarily, sort of like the skeleton, but yeah, was that you know, how much input did the band have over that and sort of the comics that came out of, you know, their character and their sort of theme, basically?
So for sure, Dave Mustaine is the main guy at Megadeth, and
Yep.
he was completely involved. He loved it. He was all about it, and he entrusted me with writing the origin of the aforementioned character, which is based on a song called "Skull Beneath the Skin." And yeah, Dave was super involved. He was great. His manager was overbearing, but he was great. And I remember one time we were proofing, and I'm talking to Dave on the phone. We're proofing something together, and I hear a crowd in the background. I'm like, Dave, is this a good time? It sounds pretty loud out there. He's like, oh, no, no, it's fine. It's fine. You know, keep talking. Crowd's really loud. It's like kind of getting louder and louder. I'm like, Dave, where are you? And he's like, oh, I'm in Japan. I'm at Budokan. I'm about to go on stage. I'm like, right on, man. Yeah, and so that relationship was great. Have nothing great to say except great things to say about Dave. He was phenomenal, particularly at that point in his life. And yeah, it was dream come true.
Awesome.
I just saw them over the summer. It was awesome.
Heck yeah.
Did you?
I did, yeah.
I just
Jones
always get
Beach.
that lyric. What is the name of the song? I don't remember. He goes, "Hello, me. It's me again."
Hello,
We'll
Oh,
find it.
me. This is the real me.
This is the
Yeah,
real
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just love it. Anyway, so you know, basically at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium. Go ahead.
The Megadeth song, I think it's called "Sweating Bullets."
Yes.
Sweating
Yes.
bullets.
So at the turn of the century and millennium, you know, there were a couple, well, some big events that happened, some things that really probably turned your world upside down. One is the untimely death of your collaborator, Stephen Hughes.
February 18th, 2000. Stephen
Yes.
passed due to complications from cancer he had in the stomach. I think he ultimately died of a pneumonia out of a complication. Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was like losing a brother. It's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And that must have been, you know, a complete gut punch.
Yes.
And I'm not sure how much that had to do with also, but within a couple years, you know, Chaos was going away as well.
Yeah, business bankruptcy. Yeah, August 2002.
So one, how difficult was it to sort of carry on at that point? And then also, you know, what were you thinking after those sort of double, you know, professional and personal blows? Like what would you do next if you were even thinking about that?
It was difficult to think what was next because I really was reeling. You know, in the end, the Chaos Comics bankruptcy, it was completely on me. But during it, I was wrestling with various factors, right? So I'd made particularly some financial mistakes that ran up debt, and we actually became pretty good at servicing the debt, but it never left money for a rainy day. We also were just getting a lot of market contraction. We were probably trying new things when people didn't want new things from us. I'm not playing this as a card, but post 9/11, there was this radical sales dip for a lot of people, and we fought it back. But in the end, it really wasn't enough. And largely, what happened with Chaos was there was a lot of financial mistakes made, and we drove up a lot of debt and had a hard time paying it back. And it was excruciating because this debt was owed sometimes to creators, institutions, and there's a multitude of feelings about that. So there's feeling horrible that I did this to people. Even so, at the time, some people took the liberty then to dance on my grave publicly. Other people were very generous of spirit and heart, but it was brutal, no way around it. And there wasn't a feeling of, the loss of Hughes was horrible. Again, like, the loss of a brother. At the time when we folded Chaos, I really did want to be put out of my misery. Not anything final, but like I wanted to stop. Basically, I wanted to get off the train, and I got off the train. So after that time, I'm going through some really colorful stuff. So there's like a business bankruptcy and everything that goes along with it, which is complicated enough. But there were some strange opportunists who were literally, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but people I knew attempt to blackmail me, like crazy stuff happened in that real short period of time. So around the following November, the business closed in August. And by the following November, I was experiencing misery. So I actually went to my best friend since I was a kid, still dear friend. I said, help me get past this. Help me completely accept the responsibility of this business failing. It's like I am resisting that I am at the cause of it. And we had the equivalent of like a serious psychological session that went on for 8 hours. And I gave him complete permission to just, annihilate me and bring me down to zero so I could be rebuilt. And at the other end of it, I did completely accept the responsibility and strangely felt some levity about it. And then started just taking the one foot in front of the other, to see what it is that I'm going to do. And I realized that I still wanted to be in comics. Now, when the business bankruptcy happened, to the best of my ability, I personally called up everyone and let them know, whether it was institutions or freelancers, people who were outside of the country that I dealt with. We did it through email. That was the best option. But I got right back out into cons and just put myself in front of people. I went right up to people and say what you got to say, and let's do what we got to do. And I don't know how that all worked out in the end. I made, again, fascinatingly enough, a lot of people were just very generous of spirit. I've also done everything that I am allowed to do within the confines of the law to make things right with people. It's a delicate issue when it comes to that business. And it was what it was. And then, it's a matter of just like putting one foot in front of the other. However, I would tell you that there was always a layer, no matter what, of the failure. And that stuck with me. So even though I'm getting out there and I'm trying to make my way, and I'm doing some good work. I wrote, like, during that time, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Chucky, scores of books, but there was something there. And in 2014, when I said I'm going to get back into comics publishing full stop, I was very, very concerned how I would be received. And then a peer of mine, a guy named Kirk Lindo, who did an independent comic book called Vampirotica, said, dude, in the end, I think you amassed some goodwill. I think you're being a little hard on yourself. So I did crowdfund back in 2014, February, my first Lady Death story, Chaos Rules. And it was a success. And what it showed me, and I didn't know this at the time, it's like, oh my God, I'm living some sort of a redemption story. And that's what people see in me. I didn't know if I was allowed a second shot, honestly. I thought maybe, I failed once. I'm supposed to, go out to pasture, but I wasn't having it. So I got back in the game. There's a lot of goodwill there. and that led to like more reconciliation, etc. So that's kind of how I feel about all that stuff in that period of time.
You mentioned I have a couple of questions, but first,
Sure.
you mentioned Kickstarter, and this
Yeah.
was 2014. This is like, what was that experience like? Because this is back when Kickstarter was barely a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was, man, I don't even know how long it was around at that
Well,
time.
it was around, and certain comic creators were adopting it. So
Okay.
Jimmy Palmiotti has been a dear friend since for 30 years plus. I saw him using crowdfunding, and he was crowdfunding like wild stuff, like dream stuff. Here's the guy, has written all these great mainstream books, but when he goes and does his own book, he's doing it about some chick with like lobster hands. And I loved that. And it was successful. So that actually gave me some confidence. And I called Jimmy up and I said, look, I'm thinking about doing some crowdfunding. Here's my question. Should I have the book ready to print, or should I crowdfund and then start the process? And he said, have it ready. And when you finish the Kickstarter, go to print. And that clicked in my head. And I said, oh, wait a minute. I could use this as a methodology of publishing. Now, the reason I say that is just prior to seriously considering crowdfunding, I was going around meeting the captains of industry, captains of retail, and interviewing them about the possibility of coming back into that arena powerfully. And I got to tell you guys, my conclusion was it's not the right arena for me anymore. So the comics direct market, although eventually, we got into it and things have happened in the last week in that particular market, but I realized that for what it is that I do, in the past in particular, I have the most success going right to the customer. So the hope with Kickstarter and that first one was, well, it had to be successful. Let me contextualize this for you a little bit. Lady Death was published by a different publisher for a period of time. And we had a disagreement, let's say. We tried to reconcile this disagreement amongst us, but it only looked like I wanted to reconcile it. So since it couldn't be done man to man, I sued that person. And they in turn, as things happen like this, they sued me. And it was for the complete control of the character Lady Death, the clear title and control. So over the course of 13 hair-raising months, that happened. And it got reconciled October 14, 2014. And I knew I was going to Kickstarter. However, how would it go? Now, can't discuss exactly what's in a settlement, but one thing that came to light was, and part of the agreement was, the other side was allowed to do another story. So on October, we settled. 1 month later, they did a Kickstarter. It was within the right. Now they did it, and in the end, it realized about $14,000. And I looked at that. Now I'd been on the road and doing cons, and not really tooting my own horn, but I show up at a con and I rock cons. Like I teach people how it's done every day of the week. All those, A-list superstars, it's like, get out of the way, man. I'm going to show you how it's done, kid. Hold my beer. So I looked at that and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And yet I was fearful, because if I were to do that, my own Kickstarter, and I only realized $15,000, I got to tell you guys, that wouldn't cut it for our plans, paying our fellow creators fairly, etc. So not really knowing what the future held, knowing that we're going to launch this kick, we put our souls into it, made an impassioned 3-minute video, shot it forever, edited it for 40 hours, just did everything in our power. And I'm happy to say that first Kickstarter did what it was supposed to do. Realized about $76,000, over 1,000 plus backers, and it started us again. Now, we had already rolled the dice, because you imagine, we settled the lawsuit. That cost tens of thousands of dollars. Start putting money into publishing comic books again. Not only were we going to do Lady Death, but then we're doing La Muerta and other books. So it's great that the Kickstarter worked, and it was life-changing. But by the same token, it had to work. And the next one had to work, and the next one. And just, luck of the Irish, thank the comic gods, it did. And crowdfunding, Kickstarter in particular, has been nothing less than life-changing for me, my family, our 20 employees, our 40 freelancers, and our entire fan base. It's just allowed us to do things that we would never have imagined otherwise. It's just been remarkable.
Is it any easier nowadays using crowdfunding versus, back then when it wasn't such a commonplace thing?
Interestingly, you should ask that. So Coffin Comics have published its comics for 11 seasons through Kickstarter. And we are crazy enough this year to officially announce and launch our own crowdfunding platform called Coffin Launch. It is for the exclusive use of Coffin Comics. It is not designed for other creators. And yeah, we're crazy enough to do that. So our first launch is February 6th for an upcoming story called Lady Death, Savage Reign. I have a mock-up of it right here. It's a sword and sorcery Conan-like story. And yes, so I do think I think that the crowdfunding space has expanded, and the amount of people who back comics has expanded, and there's a lot more room for expansion. But we chose instead for our general, what we would call our general publishing work, to do it on our own crowdfunding platform, and to do our special projects back on Kickstarter. And we're in full disclosure with Kickstarter about that, and we're on good terms about it.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I find that, I know you mentioned Jimmy Palmiotti, and he uses that for like everything that he works on. Pretty much every time we talk to him or we hear about him, there's another Kickstarter that he is running for,
we did 45 Kickstarters to date. We've generated $11.5 million on those Kickstarters. And I mean, it's incredible. But I'm saying this, trying to say this modestly, it is the tip of the iceberg of how we conduct our business. We also do 26 direct-to-customer promotions every year to our customers. So every other week, there's something new. We're celebrating things like Valentine's Day, July 4th, Goth Day, Halloween, whatever, you name it. It's another part of our business that's actually larger than our Kickstarter business.
That's fantastic.
It's unbelievable. It's remarkable. It's a comic fan's dream come true.
Is this what you wanted Coffin to be? Is it kind of is this what you wanted out of the comics industry for yourself?
Yes. So I've always wanted an island. And so we have an island. So let's say when, the thing that happened with Diamond happened, like certainly we offered materials to Diamond, but again, thank the comic gods, Diamond was 5% of our overall sales. So its impact, it was a ding, but it wasn't devastating. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've always wanted us to be autonomous and vertically integrated. I wanted to have a beautiful, magnificent headquarters that's completely custom and doled out so that when our fans visit, they're thrilled and delighted at what they helped us bring to life. Yes, this is exactly it. And I mean, let's be honest. I learned on Chaos Comics, and I was able to apply what I've learned in the Coffin Comics era. So yeah, we're living it. We're just having a blast. And look, one thing that we've reconciled a long time ago is there is no such thing as a free lunch in comics. Every day is a new day. There's phenomenon all the time. You got to respond. You got to be engaged. I'm not an absentee owner. I'm not on the beach in Waikiki kicking it back, except between Christmas and New Year's. Other than that, like I'm in the trenches every day with everybody, getting the work done. And it's a challenging business because all of us, we're all trying to predict the future. Do people want this? And it is what it is. It can be nerve-wracking. It's very fluid. Tastes change, and to stay quote unquote relevant and on top of things it's not easy. I look back on my peers. I look back on all the comics that people tried to make, and not everybody gets through. So for they're the gods, right? Let's say the living gods, the Jim Lees, Frank Millers. They're once in a generation. And then there's a lot, working people who remain relevant, but there are hundreds of comic creators who could not stay in the game. And there are thousands of comic book properties that came and went. So there just is, I know it and I'm comfortable with it. There's no free lunch in comics every day. You got to get up and you got to do the work to keep in the game, to keep in front of people's face. That's just what's up.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. You know,
Yeah.
this is from what I've read, I think your 10th anniversary, 10 years of Coffin Comics. Is that right?
That's of new comics, yes, but I was
Okay.
like crawling along as Coffin Comics. This will be our 18th year.
Got it.
So from September 2007 to 2014, I was just like doing exclusive comics for at cons and kind of knocking around and writing freelance.
Wow. Well, so one aspect that I read about Coffin and may have not been to this point in Chaos is that really all of these titles are in a shared universe now.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that sort of afford you in terms of storytelling potential that you probably didn't have before?
I've always loved the shared universe concept, and where I fell in love with it, you'll never imagine. So again, summer of 1974, very pivotal. Riding my chopper bike to the local 7-Eleven, and there are these Slurpee cups. And on the face of all these Slurpee cups are all these cool Marvel characters. And I became enchanted because I'm just recently into comics, collecting them on a monthly basis. And now these heroes of mine are on these cups. So twice a week, they're introducing these new cups. And over time, in the series 1, they released 60 cups. And here's what I took away as amazing and miraculous. In those 60 cups, you had characters who were superheroes, mutants, monsters, sword and sorcery, cosmic, and it showed me the creative potential of a universe. And I loved it. Of course, I was reading all that stuff too at the time, right? So you spend $3, you're getting Captain Marvel, you're getting all the Marvel titles you want, plus maybe some old monster comics. So that's always thrilled and enchanted me. So it's very naturalistic for me to world build. It's something that Jimmy Palmiotti and I talk about. Like, he loves doing singles, and I just love everything expanding into world building. And another reason would be, let's say you're reading a comic you enjoyed, and the main character is Spider-Man. And in Spider-Man, they introduce this other character, and suddenly this character captures your interest. Let's say the Prowler. It's like, I like this guy, the Prowler. It's nice and natural if they roll off the Prowler story. So those two formats just make sense to me. The multitude of characters in a universe from the cups, and then the whole Marvel idea of wholly introducing characters inside other characters' books and letting the world expand, 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 expand. I've always loved it.
I love it too.
Yeah, it's great. I like it when it's really planned. I mean, the cool thing I could say in my defense too is, like, we're all fans, the big books, but dear Lord, those, like, these epochs, these periods of time, come and go and crash, and it's the new thing. I mean, I remember when Secret Wars happened, that was fantastic. It still is, and that was like the biggest thing at the time. Or Crisis on Infinite Earths, like, all those were great, but since then there's been 50 of them.
Yeah.
World changing, world universe things, but it's just part of the game.
I wanted to go back a second because I know we discussed Evil Ernie, but I would love to know, where did you get the idea and the concept for him?
So this is very easy. So I think the setting is something like 1987. I lived in New Jersey. I was a metalhead. I was living in that area, and try to keep in mind, even as early as 81, 82, living in New Jersey on a Wednesday night, you could go see Twisted Sister with 3,000 people. Like, for whatever reason, the New Jersey Shore in that tri-state area was super lit up about hard rock. So this is true, I'm at the Meadowlands Arena. My hair's touching my belt. It's that long, like Jakey Lee's guitarist, Ozzy's guitarist, Jakey Lee. And I knew intellectually I wanted to do a horror story. And as I'm at the show, I looked around and I said to myself, I said, what would scare people? And I looked around and I said, us. And and that began the genesis of turning Evil Ernie into like this teenage Frankenstein, so to speak, for the time. That was the germ.
Yeah, I remember some dudes in high school, their leather jackets, and they had like Evil Ernie like on it. I don't know if it
Awesome.
was like if they drew it themselves or they had like patches or whatever, but um yeah, they were the high school metalheads. You
Oh
remember
yeah.
them, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Despite my loving Megadeth and a lot of other metal bands, they were sort of off on their own. Like I don't feel like I could have infiltrated the
Yeah, they were
true sort of
I tried.
metalhead tribe.
I
Yeah.
yeah, they were
tried.
like that. Yeah, those are the guys who live it 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was like
Yeah.
I get
7 o'clock in the morning. They were parked in their little Honda Civic and it was just blasting. And I
it.
heard it in my car with my windows up, and they were in their car with their windows up. And I was like, wow, that's loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I've
um,
I've visited every now and again, but I didn't live there like they did.
It's funny if I go back to, so I graduated high school in 1980. So for me, between 75, 76, 77, I listened to whatever what everybody else listened to on FM radio, everything from Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, whatever's on. Somewhere in the summer of 1977, I was a skateboarder and we were mischievous and, jerks. And a chick came up to us and said, you remind me of those people, those punks. And I'm like, what do you mean? What's punks? She's like, it's this music from England. I'm like, hmm. And I researched it and that was life-changing too.
Yeah.
So I I immediately went to the record store and I started learning about New York City punk at the time, which would be Blondie, Suicide, Wayne County, Ramones, all the obvious ones, the Dead Boys, and started buying all that stuff up. But I would get music magazines because I was a music person anyway, and then heard about this group, the Sex Pistols, and started hearing. And when their first record came out, fall '77, never mind the Bullocks, I got the import like 3 weeks after, and that was it, life changing. So much as I like hard rock, heavy metal, I was like, this punk stuff from New York and from Detroit a little bit and England knocks me out. Little did I know that within 5, 6, 7 years, there would be this other form of metal that combined metal and punk, and that would be thrash, which was the answer also, between Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, and early Metallica. There it is. So yeah, and so I think that energy, I try to imbue it in Evil Ernie. And by the way, behind us, we're looking at the cover of the original art for the cover of Evil Ernie #1.
I was looking at that online recently and it was on sale. Someone was selling a graded copy for like $450.
I just saw a graded 9/8 sell for $2,650 unsigned. That's another thing. I'm really proud that Evil Ernie is considered a '90s key. I love it.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. I mean, if you like comics, it's a badge of honor.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great.
So what I know, going to be mindful of everyone's time here, but
Yeah.
you have a lot of other characters like La Muerta and Hellwitch.
Mm-hmm.
Where do these characters come from? And are they all kind of like this, you have a theme,
Mm-hmm.
with your characters really. Is that
Badass bitches. Yeah.
purposeful or just kind of how it rolls or
It's really what comes out. But for sure, I specialize in dark supernatural female characters who don't take shit. That's
fair
what I
enough?
that's what I do, and I'm fine with it. They're very dominant. La Muerte is actually more subdued, a character, although violent, and a character like Lady Death or Lady Satanis. They're fine with their sexuality, sensuality. They'll use it as a weapon, but you'll notice they are not victims, and we do not show them ever as victims. And we do like some sexy and thrilling and tantalizing covers, but our characters are never portrayed as victim or less than. They're always in control. And that's the secret sauce. Like character like Lady Death, in real life, she'd be a dominatrix. There's no doubt about it. She's super dominant. And I think that's part of the attraction. So yeah, it's on purpose. I will tell you though the origin of the character La Muerta, because she
Mhm.
came from a really interesting place. I live out here in the great Southwest, the wonderful state of Arizona, and I was visiting Tucson, Arizona in November. And that's during the time of El Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead. This is a Mexican-American and Mexican holiday where people pay tribute to those who passed. So sometimes it's solemn, sometimes it's celebratory. At the time, I knew that I wanted to write a revenge story, and I just didn't know what the setting would be. So I'm down there in Tucson, and I experienced an event that just knocked me out, something that I wasn't prepared for. And that was a Dia de los Muertos parade. And this was a community-based event. The government has no hand in it, and over 300,000 people attended. And there they are parading regular people, and they are paying tribute to those they loved. It could be mother, father, daughter, son, pets, beautiful altars. And first of all, it was very emotional, and I joined in and understood what it meant, and tapped into loved ones who have passed that I myself could pay tribute to. But I also said, this is a real interesting milieu that I know so little about, but seems so rich. And I started researching Mexican-American culture in a way I hadn't before. Now, my background is actually, I'm Spanish and Irish. So Spanish from Spain, Irish from Ireland. And although I don't have that background, I started doing the research, and that this character came out of that notion. And so that's where La Muerta came from. There are other characters. Hellwitch, she's very, very fiery. I think with Lady Death, I needed a counterpoint. Lady Death, like in metal terms, she'd be sort of like an Icelandic death metal song come to life. But the character Hellwitch is much more fiery and emotional. I don't know who that would be. Cradle of Filth. I don't know. Something like that. So I needed a counterpoint. So that's where that character grew out of. But generally, I stick in that wheelhouse. I like it. I'm really happy with it. Love the dark stuff. No, again, no apologies. Our comics do have extra violence in it, a little sexy. It was interesting. We were writing, I have a co-writer, Mike McLean, and we're close. We were writing Damnation Game together, which was the second chapter of Lady Death. And I had this old habit when it came to doing curses. I was doing like ampersand and all that kind of stuff. Do you remember like in comics you couldn't curse? So I was doing that.
Right.
And then Mike asked me, he was like, why are we doing that, by the way? It was like, and I was like, well, because, people get in the comics market, they get like touchy. They don't care about the violence, but the words. And he's like, why? And I'm like, dude, you're right. Why? And at the same time, too, like Game of Thrones is on HBO, and, there's all that crazy sexuality and the violence is over the top. And I said, we got to up our game. Because we're not making these comics for children at all. These are definitely targeted towards adults. So it's like, let's up the sex and the violence, and let's curse in these goddamn comics. So that's what happened.
Shit.
You're damn right.
Yeah, why not? I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, why you're gonna, stand on some old-fashioned like principle when we're already breaking down barriers in all the different other places. So
yeah, I certainly was. It was funny.
So before we wrap up, one more question. You have a big stable of characters. You're producing a lot of books.
Yeah.
And of course, you are the writer or co-writer of many, if not all of them. But you need to have artists. Obviously, it's a visual medium.
Yes.
How do you find your artists, and what is a Coffin's comic artist in your mind?
So okay, I'm gonna be cocky here. I mean, I think we do produce some of the most beautiful comics out there. The interior artist on Lady Death, who's been with us for 6 years, Diego Renard, is one of the most career-defining artists of our generation. It's incredible. So I've been very lucky. Also, Joel Gomez, the interior artist on La Muerta, has been with us for 10 years. So think about that in real terms in comics and how people hopscotch around between big one and big two.
Yeah.
Again, using crowdfunding and being direct to our customer, we're able to pay our artists handsomely, a fair wage that makes them want to stick around and keep telling the stories that we tell. So like everybody else, we compete to see who would be the best match. Our interior artist stable has been really stable for years. Again, Diego Bernard, 6 years on Lady Death, Gomez, 10 years on La Muerta. We have another guy named Allison Rodriguez has been on our interiors for about 3 years. And it's really the competition for great quality cover artists that to me is most colorful. Because as you can imagine, I've been very lucky enough to have incredible cover artists. I had Todd McFarlane do a Lady Death cover last October, and yet it's still it's competitive. And it's difficult to sometimes get the A-listers' attention. But we have. It can be super braggy. I've had like the names go on and on and on, but there's always new targets, and there's always it takes a lot of effort for the A-listers to get their attention because they're just so happy that they have regular gigs from Marvel and DC. I just want to poke in and have them do a great cover. But I've been lucky. The list goes on. Adam Hughes, Mark Brooks. I don't know, name an artist. They probably have done a Lady Death cover, but you always want more. Jenny Frisson, unbelievable, great stuff. But I find that's the particular one is in covers, keeping our characters of the moment and relevant with the cover artists that are defining the moment. That's the game for me. And as a collector too, it's like, oh, let's collect this cover. We had Rob Liefeld do a cover that was incredible. It's fun. As a fan of the medium too, it's just fun to have all these wonderful people. The most simple, practical answer is we work every contact we can to get good quality artists, whether they're interior artists or cover artists. That might mean seeking and securing people at conventions. It might mean working with agents. I've had relationships with certain agents in comics for 3 decades. So, sometimes just say, hey, I need a colorist right now, right away. Who do you got? Who's on the stage? Who's open, right? Who's not like exclusive to Marvel? That kind of stuff. So that's a competitive element, I believe, where it becomes stabilizing for the artists that we work with is that they know they're getting paid instantly. They're getting paid fairly. They don't have to worry. We take all the worry out. Just go live your life and just turn in your pages. We're going to pay you instantly and do whatever you want with your life. But you don't have to worry. So it's less of that, where's my check coming from? Here's the other thing that we guarantee all our artists. No Coffin Comics artist ever waits for a script. So we are 1 year ahead of our publishing schedule. So as you and I speak, we're publishing 2025, in February is the first new one. We're already done till February 2026. We will not let an artist wait. I think that's something that's kind of rotten that happens even with the big companies and the biggest artists. Sometimes they're waiting on a writer. If they wait, they don't get paid. So our guarantee is you're not waiting. Because it just seems unfair. I try to let my experience working as independent contractor in the film business inform some of the practices I wanted to improve in comics. And one would be things like that. Like as independent contractor in film, you sometimes get paid net 30 days happen. You don't see your money. Now suddenly you're your own bill collector. You're chasing down the money. That's like all that kind of stuff. I don't want that for anybody involved with Coffin Comics. It not only is it's a crappy look, but it's just completely destabilizing for people.
Wow.
I really like the approach. Sorry, Joe, to jump in, but of having the sort of consistency, high quality consistency on the interior of the books, and let the sort of variation and maybe the not the trendiness, but sort of like the as things are changing, have that reflected with the covers. So you get a little bit like the best of both worlds with the art.
Well, as a 70s comic reader guy, people used to be on runs for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Jack Kirby was on Fantastic Four for an awful long time. Same thing with Thor. John Byrne, Terry Austin, Chris Claremont on X-Men. These are Simonson on Thor. These long runs are the things that really stick in people's imaginations, I think.
Yeah.
The quick stuff it has its place for sure, but I know that it's great to get that consistency of opening up a book and knowing that's going to be consistently of a quality you expect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we go, what do you have coming up? And when I say you and Coffin, of course.
I'm glad you asked. So coming up February 6th is Lady Death Savage Reign. This is coming on Coffin Comics' own crowdfunding platform. We have a Coffin launch value proposition for everyone on our platform. The format is very user-friendly. People get more bang for your buck. Any money that we saved on third-party platforms, we're moving right over to the customer. We believe our fulfillment will be faster since we won't be using surveys. We're going to cut 2 weeks off of every campaign. And it's the trusted customer service people are known to expect from Coffin Comics. Additionally, here's some of the artwork on this very special edition. It's a beautiful page by Ediano Silva. This is page 1 of the storyline where Lady Death is plunged from her current continuity and dropped into a realm of sword and sorcery. Pardon the violence, everybody. Here's a beautiful spread. Intense detail that you would probably associate with a European graphic novel.
Nice.
But that's not all. In an effort to induce people to come to coffinlaunch.com for the first 24 hours of our campaign, we are giving every backer of a physical reward a full color challenge coin. That coin will be 1.75 inches in diameter. It'll be this exact size, and it'll be 100% absolutely free as long as it is a physical pledge, non-digital. So that's exactly what we have coming up. We're encouraging people to sign up. I am happy to say that as you and I speak tonight, we have about 2,050 signups at this date, which is 700 more signups than we've ever had for a Lady Death Kickstarter launch ever. So this is boding well, but we do need people's support. So I request, if you have any interest in this stuff and you made it through this longer interview, please go to coffinlaunch.com and RSVP and get in on the madness. Get in on the launch. Coffin Launch, where creations take off.
And we're back. I love this interview. It was fun for a couple of reasons. One, I got to do it with Mike. I haven't done that in quite a while. Two, got to talk to Brian about some of his great work. As a wrestling fan, discuss Chaos and those titles. Also Evil Ernie. I mean, you know, early on as a casual comic book collector, you always saw Evil Ernie on the shelf, and it was pretty creepy. But look, he's also a metal and a horror fan, so I loved every minute of that.
Yeah, Brian is a consummate comics fan, right? He reads everything. He loves to talk about the entire comics world. But he's also makes no apologies about the kind of stuff he likes and what Coffin produces. And it's, you know, this darker, heavy metal-ish type stuff, which is just a lot of fun. And, you know, Coffin is really kind of taking off. And with this new Coffin launch system, I mean, they're going to do even greater and better and more efficiently delivered comics and product to your doorstep. So please, tomorrow, back Lady Death Savage Reign on Coffin Launch. And everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for rating, reviewing, subscribing. And we'll see you on Friday.